We are covering 2 months of NeoSPCC progress as usual, but I have to note that one of these months was particularly special for us, because early May we've got a notice that basically said, "Thank you very much, but please leave your office by the end of the month." And you need to know what May is in Russia because it's like half a month are holidays and we basically had just 3 weeks to organize everything. So we've been using the old office for almost 6 years. We had quite a lot of stuff there, including 2 server racks with physical hardware, and unfortunately this move has seriously affected both our development and operations while we were running circles relocating both physical things and various services that we had on these machines that we had in these racks. So nevertheless, we have gone through it and it all works fine now. We have a new smaller office, everything is okay, except I would not want to repeat this experience. But let's get to the main course, starting with NeoGo. It is finally out, 0.106.0 version of NeoGo with a long list of changes that includes the Cockatrice hard fork that is enabled now for both testnet and mainnet. So likely have not missed this node update, but I have to admit we will be releasing 0.106.1 soon. This is gonna fix the mainnet state incompatibility that was found May 31st and actually led to NeoGo nodes with the 0.106.0 version to stop at some blocks. So unfortunately these things happen, but we will be releasing this update as soon as possible. So please follow our announcements and likely you will get this update even before you are to hear this episode. The next on our roadmap is to have a release somewhere in the middle of June that's going to contain some NeoGo specific fixes and improvements, and you can take a look at the task list for it right here. And this version is also going to be compatible with the C# node version 3.7.4, just like 0.106.0 and 0.1. And right after that, we are going to move to protocol development things that are planned to be included in the C# node version 3.8. So that's when we are gonna align a bit more with C# development and gonna drive some features there as well. Knowing the limits is critically important if we are building some system for production use. In April, we have asked ourselves what's going to happen to the dBFT if we are to try to minimize the time per block setting in the configuration file. We have conducted a series of tests using NeoGo to answer this question. And I have to say that the results that we've got from these tests, and you can take a look at them in this Medium post that contains a lot of data and a lot of plots and all of the things that you probably want to see there. So the results are better than my expectation, because my expectation was that while we were reducing the block time to some values that are comparable to message propagation delays in the network, and while we were also pushing a lot of transaction into the network, at some point it all gonna break and we are going to have some unpredictable, change view delays that are gonna last for minutes or something like this. Some weird behavior actually was expected to be seen at some point, but it just never happened. So we had a pretty stable functioning network at all settings. And I think it's a really, really good sign of what the dBFT is capable of and what NeoGo is capable of. And also, it proves that our previous synthetic results that we've got from the benchmark testing when we were pushing transactions into 4 nodes in a local setting just on a single machine, it was obviously somewhat unrealistic because there the propagation delay, the communication delay is almost inexistent. But in fact, we were able to reach even better TPS metrics with 7 nodes running over the internet. These just show us that dBFT still has a lot of unreleased potential that can be used in various projects. This work would not be possible without our NeoBench tool that we are still maintaining and keeping updating and also enhancing, like for this test, because we have added some features for it to be possible. And you can grab it as well and try reproducing. It's all there. If you are using Neo Exporter tool, then you know already that the version 0.11.0 does not work with the cockatrice enabled N3 networks. So here is a version 0.11.1 for you that can do that and also have ARM64 and Darwin binaries provided. Moving on to NeoFS side. Since we were messing with the infrastructure in May anyway, we have decided to also move some of our mainnet nodes around the globe. So what looked like this on a map now looks like this. So we are somewhat more geographically diverse now, which I think what everyone really wanted. And also, likely you haven't noticed how this happened because we were adding nodes, removing nodes, and NeoFS continued to work just fine, as it is supposed to. We have released a new panel version 0.5.2 in April, and it's mostly an interface improvements and some EACL fixes, nothing really major there. But I wanted to say some words about containers that are being created every day now on the network, and we have more and more of them on mainnet. We have noticed that some of them were using the rep1 replication policy. Well, this is a valid policy and NeoFS can do this for you if you are really requesting it to be. This actually means that NeoFS holds a single replica for your data on the whole network. So it means just one machine storing one version of your object. Which means that if this machine ever to go offline or it to break or it to have bad memory or bad disk, so things happen, like we recently had an issue with our monitoring server that had some bad RAM and actually it affected some stored data there. So things like that can easily just kill your object and you will never be able to retrieve it again because it's gonna be forever lost. So rep1 policy is like asking NeoFS, please drop my data, I want it to be lost, and eventually it just will happen. So I'm not recommending it for production use because it will just fail. Likely that's not what you want. So please set more replicas, and we recommend setting at least 3 replicas of your data because this way NeoFS is gonna be reliable for you. As for the panel itself, we do not have any big plans for it right now. We're gonna do some minor improvements over time and roll them out. Mostly its development currently is dependent on NeoFS development and protocol development. As we're gonna have some things changing there and adding new functionality, this will be reflected in the panel. We have released a version 0.41.0 of the NeoFS node in April. It contains all of the things that I have talked about in the previous episode, like numeric, EACL, and surge filters. This release was pretty quickly followed by a 0.41.1 release that has fixed some bugs in some new functionality, and also one of the things that was fixed there is that we had some problems with payment handling. NeoFS was free for you for quite some time because of the bug. What's more strange that we had a user complaining about it. So now he pays for the storage like everyone else because we have this bug fixed. Starting with this release, we are also providing you with ARM64 and Darwin binaries pre-built and available on the regular releases page. Well, these binaries are fully functional and tested. We know they work because we are running a full NeoFS test suite on them regularly. It's now, embedded into our workflows. So while they're fully functional, we're still mostly intending them to be used for testing and development. We have noticed that some developers, for reasons that I can't understand, use Macs and, ARM-based Macs with M1, 2, 3, whatever it is now, processors. So they need these binaries to be able to run some tests locally, and this is mostly intended for this purpose. We just know that even though our homomorphic hashing library works fine on these processors, it uses generic code and not assembly optimized code. And this code is just very slow, so using it in production is not really recommended. Then in May, we have released 0.42.0 release of NeoFS node, which is currently still the latest and greatest. This release just adds compatibility for the Cockatrice N3 hard fork, because previous versions couldn't work with the networks that has this hard fork enabled. So we had to release anyway, but otherwise it doesn't have any real big updates. But still, that's the latest and greatest, please use it. The next version is going to be 0.43.0 and it's currently planned to land somewhere in July, and it's going to contain a new session token that I had talked about in the previous episode. This work is currently in progress. We have some draft for it. We're still discussing it and maybe there will be some changes, but eventually I think it's gonna settle by July, and that's gonna be the main theme for this next release. Remember that a few episodes back I have told you about Red4Sec pentest that had found some problems in our infrastructure, and we have fixed all of them except for one. Now I can say that this problem is also fixed. After the NeoFS release 0.41.0 and associated SDK update and associated NeoFS OAuth utility update and associated REST gateway update, so a lot of updates required for this particular bug, unfortunately. But anyway, we have fixed this problem. The problem itself was rather simple. sendfs.neo.org website that we still have and still running actually allowed to upload objects that would be stored for more than we have intended them to. So we had a limit on the website that allowed to store objects for just 4 days, but if you are a security researcher, you could do it so that they would be stored like forever, or actually do some fun things like this. Now it's just not possible. You really are constrained at the NeoFS level by the numeric EACL that's checked properly. REST Gateway was updated to version 0.9.0, bringing new object APIs that solve known limitations of the old APIs that we had there. We recommend you to switch to new APIs, although old ones are still there, still compatible and still maintained, and they are not going to go away suddenly. But I think eventually, maybe in a year or two, we can remove them, not really soon. As for the future, we do not currently have any big plans for the REST Gateway. We're gonna do some minor tweaks, maybe fixes, some configuration updates and things like that, but nothing major currently planned for the REST Gateway. Instead, we are going to shift our focus more to the S3 Gateway, where we have quite a number of known problems that we are going to try to solve. As you know, we have extended the NeoFS protocol recently, so an SDK update was inevitable, and here it is. The RC12 of NeoFS SDK is out, and it also brings some bug fixes that were made like a half a year ago but just were not released into the public. Now they are in this stable version and you can use it, and please update your products to using it, because you will need it, especially for proper bearer token support in the future. But in fact, this release was a bit delayed because initially we planned to include there work that is currently still ongoing. That is, we do a refactoring of our dependencies and repositories, and as I have also talked previously, we need to drop the API Go repository, the NeoFS API Go repository. So we are currently in the process of doing this, and this turned out to be a little more time consuming than we originally intended to, but still, this is gonna be included in the next SDK version that is gonna be RC13. Currently, you have this stable version RC12, and RC13 is not supposed to perform any API changes or things like that. So these changes are intended to be fully internal to the SDK. Still, this release is expected to land somewhere in June. Our GitHub action was recently updated to a new version that contains some fixes and also some new flags. And these flags allowed us to create a GitHub workflow for our NeoSPCC IO and FS.neo.org websites to auto-publish them when we have some changes to the master branch. Previously, we had this automation done elsewhere, but currently it's all moved to GitHub, and you can see how it works and you can adapt it for your website if you need to. And also a companion action to publish our Lua reports, the test reports that we are using for NeoFS, was also updated to use this updated lower level action to publish things into NeoFS, and also provide support for macOS runners.